Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second session of our Global Built Environment Conference. My name is Dan Rossiter. I am one of our sector leads here at the British Standards Institution, and today we're going to be focusing on artificial intelligence, or AI, for small businesses. Before we go through the prelude, I just wanted to go through a couple of my thoughts and feelings as to particularly why we're talking about AI today. Because I think particularly in the last year or so, it's been fascinating seeing the explosion that artificial intelligence has had. If you think about, the good old days before we had the pandemic, there were small implementations of artificial intelligence, but it certainly hadn't blown up in the way it had thanks to the likes of things like ChatGPT and other implementations. And it reminds me of an old anecdote people used to talk about when it came to Crossrail. And people used to talk about, and when I do a lot on digital transformation and future gazing, one of those good facts is that when Crossrail, or the Elizabeth line started, iPads weren't a thing. And I think what we need to be careful about is when we're future gazing, the sort of technologies and disruptions that can come out of left field to affect the way that we work today. So obviously at the start of large infrastructure projects like Crossrail, they hadn't considered that, after failed implementations, things like the Palm Pilot and PDAs, that Steve Jobs would bring out the iPad and it would explode and change the way that we dealt and engaged with content. And I'm wondering how much of what's happened with ChatGPT has done a very similar thing, where we had small and specific attempts at doing AI, but there's been this one single intervention that's become massive and created this really large uptake and interest in the topic. If you joined this morning's session, you might have heard Ant Bird discuss that there's actually some AI products out there talking about how you conform to the Building Safety Act. And I think, interestingly, looking at what are safe and rigorous implementations is going to be a very important part of our future. So who knows, could High Speed 3 have a similar anecdote where people sit there and say, you know what, when they started that project, AI wasn't even a part of the way normal people work in construction and the built environment. So hence why one of the key topics of this year is going to be artificial intelligence. And for those who don't know, small businesses make up a massive part of the built environment. Latest stats I could find is that 99.7% of companies that work in construction are small to medium enterprises. So from that point, how we can help those sorts of businesses catch on to some of these technologies is a very important thing. So hopefully this session will demonstrate some examples of small businesses who are trying to use AI and the success that will come out of it, as well as look at the way AI thinking is developing through things like the Bridge AI program and our own thinking as part of the national standards body. So with that, that's all my thoughts and feelings on the topic. So I'm just going to do a bit of housekeeping and then we can move on to who you really want to hear from. If you attended some of our webinars, this is nothing new, but for any of you who are new, first, hello. Secondly, just to let you know, this is a listen-only webinar, so we aren't able to unmute you or bring you in for the conversations, so you are there as an observer, but that doesn't mean you can't interact with today's content. The best way of interacting is if you're using what we are doing here as part of the webinar and using the Q&A function, you'll see in the little box that you have for everything, there's the option for asking questions. Now, you can ask two types of questions in that box, really. You can ask technical questions, say you can't see what's on the screen or the audio goes a bit funny, ask that question in that box and someone from the team in the background will try their best to help you. Otherwise, if you have a technical or strategic question, something relating to the presentation itself, I'll be collecting those in the background, and after we've gone through talking to our speakers, we'll have a joint Q&A session where we'll talk about some of the common questions and common themes that come out of your questions to see what the panel thinks about that. So by all means, use those buttons to the best of your ability, put as much in as you like, and then we'll collect them as we go, and there will be reminders throughout the session to interact as much as possible. One question we often get is, will there be on-demand access to it afterwards? So if you complete the feedback survey that comes afterwards, you'll have a link to the recording so you can rewatch today's webinar, or if you've missed some of it and wanted to go back, or even better, share it with friends or colleagues, you can do so. And ultimately, this CPD is recognised. So by doing the feedback form, going through that process, you could also get yourself a certificate to demonstrate that you were here to help support your CPD if that is something that you care about is important to you. So those are some just good facts for you to keep abreast of as part of the housekeeping. And I think that is pretty much all the preamble that is needed. So we have a wealth of speakers today, but the very first one whom I'm going to introduce is Dmitry Minsky of InForecast, and he is one of their co-founders. So what I would like to do is, instead of me trying to poorly explain who Dmitry is, I think I'd invite Dmitry, if you want to come off or come on camera even, tell everyone a little about yourself, and I think we can leave it with you, sir. So thank you for joining, and I hope everyone enjoys the presentation.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Dan. My name is Dmitry. I'm, as Dan correctly mentioned, just a quick check of the slides. Sorry. As Dan correctly mentioned, I'm co-founder and the CTO of InForecast, the one platform you need for real estate project ESG strategy and compliance. And what I want to discuss with you today is the topic of innovating with AI as a small business, which we are still. And this particular topic I find truly exciting and very relevant today as we all go through the AI revolution that unfolds in front of our eyes. Over the past 6 to 7 years, I've been working with AI across multiple industries and applications as a researcher, as an engineer, and now as a co-founder. And during this time, I learned a few key lessons that I want to share with you today to help you avoid some of the mistakes that I made or saw being made. And I'd like to start I would like to split this talk into 2 sections, talking about the artificial intelligence itself. So we'll define it, see what primary functions it may serve, look at some limitations and pitfalls that you need to be aware of, and I'll share my lessons that I learned over the time working with artificial intelligence applications and products. And then we'll talk about how we apply those lessons in InForecast while trying to solve the problems of ESG. And the first thing I want to do is talk about the definition of artificial intelligence. And if we look at Collins English Dictionary, the definition that we'll find would state that the general idea of autonomous agents capable of independently analyzing the environment and acting on it can be referred to as artificial intelligence. And arguably and truthfully, this is a very broad definition. And something relatively simple, for example, a fire alarm, can also fall into this definition. Say we had a system with a moving average to track the normal temperature, and then it would scream when the instant temperature is too far from normal. But you would argue with me, Dmitry, about that's not the ChatGPT that we were expecting. That's a very simple application. And the truth is that artificial intelligence is a very diverse field. It includes things like logic programming, when you define a set of constraints and the program tries to navigate its way around it to give you the outputs that's often used for planning and scheduling. It also includes rule-based systems that you can define by a set of rules to say, okay, if this is true, then you do that. Maybe a little bit more complex than that, but nevertheless not too difficult. And it's often used in traffic management. But if we move on the scale of complexity of AI, we soon will hit the machine learning algorithms. And those are the algorithms that evolve with increase in exposure to data. And a good recommendation of such algorithms could be recommendation systems. The more such systems track one's behavior, the more accurate its suggestions will be. And as a subset of this, there is a deep learning scene of algorithms that not just evolve with the increased amount of data, but they actually learn it themselves using this data. And those algorithms, good examples of those algorithms may include AlphaFold, that's used to predict the 3D structure of proteins, or our favorite ChatGPT, that's trained to understand and generate coherent and contextually relevant text. Interestingly, both of these two share a very similar overall architecture and model approach. And overall, the variety of applications is what makes AI so exciting and tricky at the same time, because it becomes rather challenging to navigate the landscape. And if we're trying to narrow down the primary function of AI, we could say that AI systems are there to simulate human-like behavior, reasoning, and problem solving to perform tasks that typically require human intelligence. And this sounds pretty intuitive and sparks the imaginations of many. However, before taking any action, we should really ask ourselves a couple of questions to direct the boost of creativity that we get from this. What is our actual business strategy, and what are the biggest blockers that we need to address when thinking about potential solutions, including AI? And while continuing thinking about it, we can summarize the impact that AI can potentially make on our business in two main ways. So AI can help you increase the existing value by improving the efficiency, productivity, saving costs, or it can create new value for your business by offering new capabilities and creating new markets. And some could take it to extremes and say, okay, we'll go with the first approach and replace half of our team, we'll increase our margins, so we'll be super rich. Or taking the other approach, even better, we can create new hands-free revenue stream to make millions as if by magic. Unfortunately, though, there is no magic about AI. And when thinking about implementing AI-powered products, you really need to think about the trade-offs that those systems bring for themselves. So, and here I would like to suggest you a relatively simple framework that I use for high-level evaluation of such systems. So I think about this performance trade-off in four main criteria. First of all, it's accuracy. Then generalization, interpretability, and complexity. Accuracy is pretty simple. It's anything that describes the correctness of the model, and this really is determined typically by business requirements. Then generalization is how well your model is performing out of the sample. I'll give you a simple example to try to simplify that. So say we trained a model to distinguish between Italian and American cars. It was working fine, but now we're not interested in cars anymore. We want to distinguish between Italian and American houses, for example. How well is the model going to perform there? So this is the basic principle of generalization. And the most general system would not care about what task you give it. It will just solve it. Then interpretability is the reasoning behind the output. So explaining why a certain decision has been made. For example, in banking, it's very important to tell why you're not giving a loan to one person, but giving it to another. And finally, complexity. You've got to really understand the required resource in terms of human resource that you will require in terms of compute to solve your problem. And really the question you should be asking yourself is, again, based on the business strategy, you should now ask yourself a question. What can and can't be compromised out of these? And just to give you a practical example of how this can be applied, I would like for us to evaluate the free ChatGPT as two things. One as a general knowledge extractor, and two as an in-book search engine. So first of all, we'll start with setting some thresholds, some specs for our system. It would say that we want at least 90% accuracy, at least 5 out of 10 interpretability, at least 7 out of 10 generalization, and we don't want to spend more than £1,000 per month on this. Okay, now we can start evaluating. So the evaluation process here is pretty simple. We'll just ask a couple of prompts to ChatGPT and see what it gives out. So the first, to evaluate the general knowledge extractor, I asked ChatGPT to list all British monarchs of the 19th century. And it gave 100% correct output. It told me the duration of the reign. It told me when it started, when it ended. Interpretability was pretty good, and generalization, I gave it a pass on generalization because I'm sure if I asked it about Spanish monarchs, it would still be pretty good. But when I tried asking for first and principles in Ray Dalio's book Principles, ChatGPT wasn't performing so good anymore. In terms of accuracy, it only was able to give me 7 out of 10 correct principles. Few of them were paraphrased, but I still counted them as valid. Interpretability, it didn't give me any references within the book. It didn't tell me any more except for the titles, which sometimes weren't entirely correct. Generalization, again, I didn't give it a good mark because if it couldn't figure out one book, probably it isn't going to figure out other books. And to summarize, ChatGPT is a good general extractor based on metrics, but not so good in book search engine. And the question is, how do we make it a good in-book search engine? Typically, in normal software development, you would follow the very simple paradigm of developing, then testing, and then releasing. And once you've tested it once you've written the tests, you don't really worry about this feature anymore because you know that outputs are consistent and exactly known. So you know if it's working in your test, it's probably working in the production environment as well. Unfortunately, it's not quite the case with artificial intelligence algorithms because their outputs are determined based on probability-based calculations. What this means is that for small changes in the input, the changes on the output could be quite fast. And moreover, for the same input, especially for difficult cases, you don't always get exactly the same output because, again, it's all probability-based. And this means that modeling and monitoring becomes critical. And for managing those situations, Amazon, for example, suggests this well-architectured machine learning lifecycle that consists of 6 main stages. One is defining business goals, then transforming those business goals into machine learning problems. Then from machine learning problems, we figure out what to do with data so we can develop the models. Then when models are ready, we deploy them and monitor. And when this circle is closed, then the system becomes a living and breathing system because now you've got to continue monitoring based on your business goals, and the results of the monitoring will affect the model development. And the model development is then translated into new requirements for the data. But you can say, Dmitry, we shouldn't worry about it because OpenAI did all of that for us. We now just need to prompt and give it some random data, and it will do everything for us. And partially it's true, actually. OpenAI innovation, I believe, comes less from the model, but from the ability to serve millions of people at the same time, something that's done really for the first time in history with large-scale machine learning models. And if we summarize the effect OpenAI had on this pipeline, we can say that it significantly simplified the tasks of machine learning problem framing, data processing, and completely taken away the burden of model development and deployment, which is great for us. But this only means that the emphasis now is even more emphasis now is on what we can control, such as our product goals, such as defined by business goals and monitoring, and our data defined by model framing and data processing. In terms of business goals, you've got to make sure your problem is clearly defined, your desired outcomes are well understood and clear, and expectations are well managed. And monitoring is also super critical. It requires continuous testing and validation, it requires a closed feedback loop with customers and users, and effective within team communication. But on the other side, the thing that you can control too is your data, because data is what shapes your model-based AI application, especially if the model is fixed, as it is with new OpenAI retrainable models. And to give you an example of how data shapes the applications, we can look at an example of 2 automotive autonomous vehicle systems, where Tesla has the most user-tested AI with millions of miles of user-driven miles with autopilot. We can say that it has good generalization. It will be probably the best system on most roads in most scenarios. On the other hand, we've got Wavy, who are still a startup, and they don't have such vast amounts of data to deal with and to benefit from. But on the opposite hand, the unique advantage of Wavy is that they've been out and about in London every day since 2018. So they are the most tested in London and the UK, and they've got this unique capability of driving in autopilot in London. And actually, this YouTube video that you'll be able to click later when I share this presentation with you, it shows how Bill Gates, who was very excited about getting out of office in London, going for a burger and back in a fully autonomous car. He knows that Tesla is not going to do that, because what really defines Wavy in this scenario is the data that they possess. And this is exactly the idea behind the data-centric AI concept that exists in the AI community. And this is what Andrew Ng, one of the pioneers of AI and probably one of the most famous teachers of AI, says about it. He says that to get the results right, you need to hold the model of code and iteratively improve the quality of your data. And he gives this example of a hospital or a factory that doesn't typically have anyone with machine learning experience on staff. What their employees have, however, is data experience, a thorough knowledge of the domain in which they operate. So knowing how to assemble high quality data in their domain is their professional competitive advantage. And I believe this is exactly what SMEs should follow as well. Okay, now as we know how the machine learning pipeline works, and now as we know that probably we need more data because this will help us fix our in-book search. So let's try to do so and fix our example. So to improve accuracy and interpretability, we'll use prompting to better define tasks to tell it exactly what we want from the model. We'll fine tune it slightly with supervision, where we use more diverse and task-specific data to get the results that we want in terms of outputs. And say we hit our accuracy targets, say we hit the generalization and interpretability target, but with it, complexity rises, because now we cannot just use the free ChatGPT version. We need to pay for the subscription, but also probably we wouldn't be able to do it ourselves. We would require some engineer to help us with the task, at least on a part-time basis, which would cost us, say, 3,000 per month. And the outcome that you can realistically expect from this exercise would be a good prototype. It may even work for your internal use, like for within the company use, but it's far from ready for production. And in fact, production-ready code would cost you probably 4 to 6-fold more than the complexity shown here. And really, to conclude, I wanted to say that recent advances and progress in AI has made prototyping accessible to most. And that's how the whole society, everyone got excited about AI, because now they could touch it, they could feel it, they could see the incredible things it could do. However, to make it into a valuable solution that solves a painful problem for customers, it takes completely different level of investment, both resource-wise and understanding-wise. And very few understand the complexities that are actually involved in developing the production-ready AI. And I believe that the couple of things are required as keys for achieving success with AI. First of all, you need to manage your expectations. You need to understand the trade-offs, the complexities, the different paradigm in which machine learning systems exist. And therefore, you need to treat it accordingly. You don't treat it as any other feature that you would normally have in a software, but you treat it as a machine learning project, which requires this living and breathing system that is continuously monitored and fed back. So from it, a few lessons that I learned. I learned not to use AI to impress in the short term, because it's not sustainable. Even though it can create a wow effect, it's hard to maintain this wow effect in the long term, because it just requires a lot of investment. Second of all, I wouldn't call OpenAI and claim that I have a new product to start up, because if you could do something in a few weeks with a little bit of data in your resource understanding, in your domain understanding, and it could work, you still don't have a product probably, because imagine if somebody bigger went and did the same with bigger exposure to you, with two more users and two more data, they'd probably achieve even better results. But at the same time, I don't get tricked anymore with shiny demos that we find online. Over time, with research conferences, with many demos that we see from companies, we find that they don't normally generalize. Often case, what we see online is one successful occasion when something worked out of a lot of other not very successful occasions when the system didn't quite work. So what I would do on the other hand is I would be mindful of the AI development cycle and trade-offs that we need to consider when developing new AI algorithms and products. I would say that there is no AI startup as such, but there is a good data-driven business because, as I mentioned before, data is what really defines your differentiation from others. And I've left a few links for some free assessment powered by Digital Catapult that you can take to find out your position in the data maturity. And finally, yeah, I would start with hiring the right people in the right order to make sure you can actually plan the AI product development. But very first question I'd ask myself actually is, do I really need the high-end AI tools to solve my problem? In often case, I don't necessarily do. And this is exactly what I want to discuss in this section when I talk about how we use AI in Forecast and what strategies we follow when talking AI. So Forecast is real estate project ESG strategy and compliance platform. We started about a couple of years ago. We're still early in the development, but we have already achieved a few successes. And that's what I want to talk to you about. But before I talk about the AI, just a little bit on the problem itself that we're trying to solve. So ESG is the area that we tackle. It really is a very broad area again. It covers environmental, social, and governance. And we also want to include return on investment in there. And if the issues that real estate developers have is that for a single project to cover the ESG, you would require a lot of data and a lot of disciplines to be involved. And normally it's managed in spreadsheets and via emails, and it's all very messy. And when multiplied by tens of projects that can run simultaneously, it just becomes a big mess with no organizational level visibility. But if we try to split it out into sub-problems, we can say that ESG is a project on its own that consists of 5 main stages that can be grouped into 2 main groups: strategizing and bringing this strategy to life. And there is a few issues that exist in this pipeline. First, at the very beginning, often it's unclear what needs or can be done beyond the building regulations. So art of the possible isn't often available. And then the second of all, sustainability and ESG investment is often pulled out because of the limited understanding of return on investment. Often it's not clear how this investment in sustainability will make money for the investors, and therefore many people stick to just bare minimum building regulations. And finally, the strategy is often disjointed from the implementation stage. So what was relevant in the first 6 months of development is probably not as much relevant, or at least changed 20 years after. So our goals, therefore, are to increase the awareness at the beginning of the process, improve the continuity of the pipeline, increase productivity and traceability. And the vision that we have is to make ESG on autopilot, but still keep people in the loop so that they can approve and decide how to best execute the projects. And the way we are using the autopilot principle is by splitting this process into 5 main stages. When in the first stage, we need to understand how humans are doing it at the moment, and we do it with via many collaborations with industry and figuring out how this is implemented at the moment. Then we're trying to systemize and optimize this process, and oftentimes it can be just manual prototyping with relatively not difficult systems. Before this can grow into a more assisted process where parts of this process use technology to take some of the burden away. And that's how we validate that this approach and this creating the autonomous system here actually makes sense. Then we can go partly autonomous, where parts of the process are automated, or the automation is only for limited use cases. And this is the point where we focus mainly on safety, reliability, and we iterate until we can make this process safely autonomous. This is, at this stage, we want to connect this part into a fully automated pipeline, that would still require humans potentially to intervene for monitoring and key decision making. But in forecast, we started, as I've been talking about it, the whole speech, we start from data because we believe data is the key here, especially on sustainability. It's not so easy to find any building specific data on sustainability parameters. So at the moment, we have completed the Project ESG Copilot, and it's currently in operation. And the way we achieve that is by working tirelessly with our industry partners to understand how the problem of scoring and managing sustainability and ESG is actually performed in the industry right now. Then we try to systemize and optimize these processes before we got to the stage where we could assist the ESG execution, monitoring, compliance. And now we are able to address the issues of endless spreadsheets, visibility and traceability are improved, productivity is improved, as well as organizational level controls. And once the data is sorted, we can now move to modeling. And this is our current focus, where we are at prototyping and validation stage, where we're trying to create this partly autonomous system, where we could gather some baseline information on the building and provide high-level execution plans on how to improve the ESG, wider ESG, not just energy, but social value and all the rest of it. And we propose a few high-level execution plans for selection by client. And importantly, people make all the decisions still in the process. What AI does, it just builds those business cases by analyzing all the potential options and the initial stage of the building. For the next stage, what we see is, again, continue to develop this partly autonomous systems. And the next step would be to go deep and, based on the selected high-level plans, create a detailed implementation strategy. So, but people will still need to verify and approve it. And the vision is to then combine those partly autonomous systems and the Copilot that is developed right now, continue to test and iterate on those before we can achieve a safely autonomous system. But importantly, we still envision that people will be required in the process to direct and approve the AI-powered decision-making, but effort will now be minimal and mostly focused on strategy, as compared to what's happening nowadays when people are just tired of manual day-to-day activities that don't actually bring much value. So just to summarize, our approach to AI is to develop a robust data system, create a strong and useful baseline that is incrementally improved over time. And asking myself this question again, do I really need to go and use high-end AI tools to solve the problem? I would say that even though such solutions may be viable and they may yield superior performance, we still need to look at the trade-offs. And currently, for the stage that we are at, the complexity and interpretability sides of the trade-off force us to explore alternative solutions within the AI space. So to put it simply, we don't start with using LLMs to begin with, because they're quite difficult to restrict to what we need to achieve. And this is really everything that I wanted to cover today. As I said, I've prepared some useful resources that you can get if you scan this QR code here. You can also get the entire presentation by scanning it. So it's been Dmitry, great pleasure to present in front of you, and looking forward to the Q&A. Thank you very much.
No, that's brilliant, Dmitry. Thank you very much for that. It was very comprehensive, and I think some of the bits that I pulled out, I think in particular, I thought your framework looked really useful in that way of being able to look at it from the point of view of accuracy, generalization, interpretability, complexity. So I thought that was a really nice way of expressing it. I think one of the things I really enjoyed was that idea that there is no AI startup, but data-driven businesses, and I think it's a very good outlook to have. So thank you for that, and you're perfectly on time as well, which means that which is even better. So yeah, you're more than welcome to escape from there. Thank you. And what we'll do is we'll introduce our next speaker now. Thank you very much. So after Dmitry, we have the pleasure of introducing Erica Yang to you. She's the founder and CEO of Chiltern Computing Limited. And in a similar way, Erica, feel free to come off or come on camera. I've done that twice now. Introduce yourself, tell everyone a little about yourself, and otherwise, the audience are yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Hello, everyone. I'm Erica Yang. I'm from Chiltern Computing, an Oxford-based AI technology company. We do AI research, product development, and consultancy. So today I'm going to talk to you about this topic, AI for construction projects. So for us, a company, sort of technology company working in AI, and also with a team that have many years of experience with deep tech and data technologies and all that, we actually perhaps have a more optimistic view about AI and where it's heading. So today, these particular sessions, we are going to basically, there are three sort of items on my agenda. First, I will give you an overview of what the construction sectors, or the way we see it, particularly focusing on construction projects. There are construction, as you know, is a vast sector that does involve a very vast range of projects from different sizes and different complexities and all that. So I'll give an overview of that sector as we see it. And second is that perhaps the core of this talk is about how do we see the AI, and particularly the new AI, if you like, the whole movement in, like Dan says, in the last 12 months, really unfolding in front of everyone's eyes, sort of everyone globally can see this rapid evolutions of AI and its offering to the world, literally. It's actually these days, it's very hard to come by someone who have never talked about AI or never seen AI in action. Even my kids in secondary school, they use they test it, and ChatGPTs and all that. Not for homework, not for classwork. Obviously, that's not allowed. But it's you can see the enthusiasm and the popularity of this new type of technologies to spark the imagination. Next, please. Yes, hi. So the first part is where I'm going to talk about why we are interested in construction and give you a view of how we see this sector as it is today. Next, please. So first of all, obviously we don't have an interactive face-to-face interactions here. But first of all, let's say, do you have a construction experience? Maybe the answer will vary here. But actually, as perhaps quite a lot of us in this audience, we already have a house or have a flat. That if you have ever rent or owned a property, that actually perhaps very likely you will already have construction experience. What that means is that there is a whole spectrum of construction projects ranging from a few £100, few hours, to the very large end, to a few £billion, like the Crossrail or the infrastructure project we talk about, Dan mentioned earlier. So there's a whole spectrum of different type of project. And actually, if you look at, even they differ in size, differ in how they are delivered, they develop, they plan and all that. But in essence, what construction sector, particularly from a project point of view, one common thread across, doesn't matter the size and all that, is that complexity. Even with a smaller home improvement project, like the picture you see now, smaller one, sort of an extension, a few, say tens of thousands, a few tens of thousands pounds and all that extension project, actually it's very complex. It often involves quite a large number of, sort of quite a spectrum of contractors of subcontractors, as well as sort of different type of trades involved in, for example, this type of project, but also so involved in sort of in terms of coordination across different trades and different type of work. Work in construction, it's particularly differ from other sectors, is that sometimes, in many cases, it has to be done in a precise order by a precise sort of precise step, and then it has to follow regulations. And actually, if you look at the complexity of that resulting in actually a very sophisticated landscape in terms of what the construction project you will see in a everyday in work or in the home improvement sort of front, they're very different, but the complexity is the same. And next slide, please. So that gives you a feel of what we are talking about. So I will start with from sort of residential build or home build. Now, this type of builds doesn't have to be sort of home improvement project. It can be sort of developer driven projects. Sort of someone buy a plot of land and then develop the properties for home residential properties, but they are sort of does involve the builders and a big range of different type builders, contractors and subcontractors. Actually, this problem of roach builders is actually still quite a commonplace. If you look at just one example, the recent home survey, actually not that recent, but pre-COVID survey done by the Home Owners Associations, it shows that 79% of the home owners actually who have done projects, building project, home improvement project, that they, in their project, 79% say they face obstacles, and then 42% of them actually saying there is a big issue of finding reliable builders. So actually, if you think about it, it's perhaps not quite aligned with what your feel about the sector, because there are obviously websites out there, and you hear either on the radio and all that quite a lot popular website. But actually, this is still very much a problem, and it's a problem that actually is still being actively debated by our Parliament, UK Government Parliament, in a recent discussion. So the problem with this is that it's very difficult to track them. It's very difficult because there are so many of them, and vast majority of them are actually very sort of one-man band, if you like. They're very difficult to regulate, and regulations actually is a non-trivial thing. Like Dimitri has just shown, there are lots of regulations, building regulations, safety regulation, materials regulations, and all that. And actually even more challenging for the developers and home owners to understand and identify those, if you like, the roach builders or cowboy builders sometimes. And actually, a lot of developers and homeowners have no or very little experience in managing building projects. Think about it. How many of us managing those projects in a day in, day out basis? Even if you are qualified project managers, the building project is very specialized. So that problem of finding reliable quality builders is still remain a big issue. And often when the obstacle comes, and that sometimes could lead to dispute, and people often find it quite difficult to figure out what to do. Maybe people heard about small courts, claims courts, maybe not, but there's a whole variety of different routes you can go into to resolve the problem. But the issue is that most people are not really aware of them and not aware of what to do. So you may say that there are lots of websites with ratings, testimonials, and all that, but then it's the question of they don't work always. If you think about it, for example, Amazon, they have lots of ratings and testimonials, but Amazon actually every year spends billions on tracking down the roach retailers or sellers. So those testimonials sometimes is not always that reliable. It's still a very big challenge facing the sector. And next, please. Yeah, I guess I need to accelerate a little bit. Okay, commercial sector is also facing quite a lot of challenges. Next, please. So if you look at the commercial bill, we have the numbers from the recent years. One is from the UK. It's actually telling sort of the story here, even without getting into the nitty-gritty of the stories. And actually, this is about the commercial bill, basically much bigger projects, millions of pounds, and sometimes it's a tens of millions of pounds project. They survey from those. It's actually, there's a huge rise in terms of the dispute, a construction-related dispute occurred in those projects. And the average value of the construction dispute actually has increased in 2020, sort of the first year of COVID, by 117%. That's in the UK. In the US, actually, the number is a lot more recent, sort of COVID sort of facing towards the number there is from the sort of towards the COVID end, if you like, the end of 2022. But still, the rise of the construction-related dispute is still sort of got a huge rise in those sectors as well. That's in the US. Both number, actually, you may argue what exactly is happening. So the numbers is actually a reflection of a combinations of some of the factors. I'm going to list it now. One is the materials prices, to do with obviously to do with all these energy crisis and supply chain issues. Second is to do with the labor issues. Construction, as you may have expected, is a big issue in terms of the labor shortage, as well as other type of issues of finding the right kind of experts and professionals. Next slides, please. So the key thing is that for this talk is that what exactly is the role of AI in construction? So as I said, I'm very actually, as a company, as well as quite a few partners we work with, we are actually very excited about this rising sort of, one is the awareness of AI, second is the potential of all this can do for this sector. So I'm now going to go into that a bit. So next slide, please. So particularly, I call this, so what's happening in the last 12 months, everyone, I assume everyone heard about ChatGPT, but that's what I mean by the new AI there. But actually, if you dive deeper, it's really not just about ChatGPT in our view. It's the rise of a new spectrum of AI capability that actually formally they are saying underpinned by the large language model, or more generally that they call it the foundation models. So what happens is that as some of you may already sort of very impressed by the capability of a ChatGPT, some might not, because it's not always correct, as Dimitri has pointed out. But the point is that a lot of these sort of AI services, very large AI services, actually, they take in the internet's data, and understand the languages, understand the nuance behind those texts, behind those content they find on the internet. Obviously, there is a lot of copyright issues. Put that aside. But in terms of technology, this new, if you like, this new development, AI developments, really means that they open up a whole spectrum of capability, not just about text. Okay, first of all, they get a lot of text, but the key thing here I wanting to emphasize is that the language capability is not just about the natural language processing, but actually more about natural language understanding. But language, again, not text, is actually to do with other things as well, speech and voice and context. So what that means is that instead of just looking at it as text, this is the speech human to human interactions is actually have much better capability in understanding that nuance. Not just about transcription, not just about what we already seen, perhaps about the machine translation between different languages, but actually they can understand the nuance a lot better than the past. But also about that voice. The voice, we've heard about, we've seen a lot about wearables and interactive wearables enabling interactions in a much more intuitive way. Underpinning by this type of large language model, a more foundational model, it actually enables us, human beings, be able to interact with the machines, interact with the real world, the physical world. Construction, at the end of the day, is all about the physical world, what's happening, who's doing what, where, and how, and all that. So, and another element is that contextual understanding and influence and understanding. That's really critical. I think one of the key things, perhaps the analogy we can give, if you still remember, just now we've seen the autonomous driving. In the past, we've seen autonomous driving, sort of keep saying it's coming, or fully autonomous or semi-autonomous driving. All these are what we call sort of based on images, based on videos, based on what? Based on the machine, computers capturing data, content from the real world, and then starting training the system. The system, if you notice just now, the drivers in the autonomous car, particularly fully autonomous car, like the ones that Bill Gates was on just now, the drivers are sitting behind the driving wheel, and actually hands-free. But here, with this new type of AI or language enable, much more natural language enable understanding, human is no longer sitting behind the wheel, if you like. Human behind the wheel, it means that you will be passively observing what the machine does and react or not. But here, with the new language understanding and supporting by this vast range of understanding collecting from the internet, it allows human beings to be part of that interaction, driving the machine not as a sort of outsider or onlooker, be part of that interaction, very close interactions with the machine, and then to interact with the real world. That's the fundamental difference, and that's a really, really exciting and fundamental differences. We think that we're opening up a whole spectrum of new applications. It's still early days. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it's perfect. It's not at all. But however, as you can see, this is why fundamentally changing. Everyone get onto just another example. I think this is important as a takeaway message from this talk. Everyone interact with ChatGPT. If you ever try that, everyone interact in a very different way. That means you are seeing very differently from what I'm seeing from ChatGPT. The reason being is that large language model is no longer like the small, well, I wouldn't call it small model or small AI. In the past, everyone will be able to have a window of view that of their interest to that particular person. That's really exciting and really fundamental. Before this point in time, I mean, last 12 months, it hasn't been that possible to do that at scale for so many different people. So everyone have a different view. So that's really important. Next, please. So a conclusion first, just save you time wondering what we are thinking. We really believe that and truly believe that AI will transform sector business. In this case, it's the construction sector business structure as well as the dynamics. So this is go way, way, way beyond the digital transformation or digitization. Traditionally, if you think about digital transformation, again, another term you might have heard a lot in the past few years, it's about automating, digitizing things and automating, connecting things. But the things itself does not have much intelligence. But now with the new AI, it's really possible to embedding a lot of this to drive the changes with the human intelligence in the loop. That's really, really exciting. Next slide, please. Then why? Why? So the key thing here is that we wanted to highlight that the differences all this will drive is the process changes. Process changes is really critical because it's not about improving the productivity or efficiency of individual businesses. Company with money. In the past, the way we see it is in the past, company with lots of resources, with lots of money, will be able to embrace big technology, big changes, such as AI or data-driven technology and all this. But now the things change because it will fundamentally change the process. The power, therefore, the power dynamics. Basically, in the past, if you are smaller, say a very small construction firm or very smaller project, you wouldn't have the resources, you wouldn't be able to afford it, you wouldn't be able to have the awareness because you don't have that understanding or awareness or really understanding how to tap into those changes. So, but now, because of this type of changes happening, we believe, and I believe that all this will change fundamentally the power dynamics. Once the power dynamics starting to change, the structure or the composition of the sectors will change. yeah, I can give more examples, but in the interest of time, I think I better move on. Next slides, please. So I will highlight 3 changes, specific changes that I see AI will really make a difference. One is that it will have a very much societal focus. Construction sectors, like perhaps very different from other sectors in the UK, is actually one of the biggest sectors in the UK in terms of GDP. It contributes to 9% of the UK's economic activities and employment. So what that means is that there are quite a few major challenge faced by construction industry in the UK, not unique globally, but it's really a big issue in the UK. One is that climate change. What that means is that the usage, that zero carbon sort of agenda and all that, understanding how to use materials, how to use construction project more effectively or more efficiently from environmental point of view. That's one thing. Second is that there is a huge, as mentioned earlier, huge sort of issue facing by the labor shortage as well as the aging population. So all this means that the expertise and professional expertise required by the sector actually on the one hand is rising. On the other hand, as the skilled workers and all that are retiring, it becomes a really big issue. But AI and technologies such as AI, involving AI, can really make these changes, balancing that, producing that societal focus changes that lead to a sector change. Next slide, please. And second, we will see that we mentioned that changes, the process changes and all that, but really it's about if things are digitized and things does have that intelligence, not just the machine intelligence, but also the human intelligence embedded in that process and the loop. What that means is that the system, the technology will deliver a new type of project that will focus on process optimization, not about individual, one business or another business. It's actually will enable all these business to connect it together, and therefore it will enable that value exchange through this value add connected services and devices, we believe. Next slides, please. And number 3 is this all 360 sort of all-rounded angles. Remember earlier I mentioned the recent new AI development is really not just the way we see it, not just a technological advancement alone. It is actually allowing business to interact with customers, interact with businesses, other business in the supply chain, in the built environment in a much more effective and cost-effective way, but also enabling all of us to take it into assess and understand the project in a much more evidence or driven approach. Because in the past, we very much, like what I mentioned earlier, we very much rely on people's testimonial and the ranking and rating. But now a lot more possibility will take place once we have all this AI in place, and we will have this ability and capability to capture all this evidence-based matrix. Next, please. Right, so just 2 more minutes. I will give you a very high-level introductions about the AI areas we are working on. We are also working in the Bridge Innovate UK Bridge AI program. Actually, we are working on them very specifically with some partners developing a new generations of AI for construction projects and managing the supply chain and all that. So next, please. So in terms of projects, what we see is that a lot of the developments can really propagate the benefits across the entire sort of ecosystem. The projects involving, traditionally, we see the projects only sort of involving the clients and the builders. But actually, with all this sort of, if we take a holistic view about AI in terms of data management, in terms of data-driven decision, as well as embedding that human intelligence in that loop, we will be able to have a much more inclusive as well as all-rounded way of seeing delivering, planning, and driving construction projects. Particularly, that will involve service provider, the developers, the builders, and suppliers. So what that result at the end will be better build quality, as mentioned earlier, that a lot more evidence will be able to be collected along the way from the very beginning, understanding who is doing a good job by evidence rather than by only by the testimonial or rating. And secondly, we will also be a much better understand of how to deliver a project. What is the best, sort of what is the more efficient project in terms of environmental impact? What is a good project in terms of project management? What is a fantastic project in terms of customer engagement and satisfaction? Not just at the end, customer give you a star or not, or give you lots of star or testimonial, not just by one or two people's words, but actually it's about the project, the entire project life cycle. Finally, next slide, please. And here is a range. As I said, we are not saying that AI is perfect. There is actually quite a challenging landscape of issues that really needs to be resolved before AI can be really used, well, if you like, independently. Currently, AI, we do believe that AI can be used in the co-pilot sense, i.e. human is really important part of that decision-making loop. That I would say, or will always, perhaps always will be the case. But that depends on the quality of the data, like Dimitri earlier mentioned, but also it depends on the development and operational environment and process. This is a very big topic, but this is a whole range of different issues relating to data, relating to the trustworthiness in the system, in relating to the standards requires across interoperability across the entire ecosystem. So there's quite a lot of interesting topics we are also exploring. Finally, next slide, please. Finally, if you're interested in any of those topics, please do get in touch, either via our email address there or just or on LinkedIn. We are based in Oxford, so you can see there's a nice surrounding. We're really welcome to drop by and have a conversation. Thank you.
No, that's brilliant, Erica. Thank you very much. And again, very well timed there. There's been a flurry of comments and questions coming in on the chat. We'll save those for the Q&A at the end. But just to know, your presentation's garnered a lot of interest, and there's some good comments that we'll come back in and discuss. So thank you very much for that. Hopefully, we'll now move on to our third speaker, Claire Morris from Innovate UK. Hi, Claire. Nice to thank you for joining us. So like with everyone else, please feel free to introduce yourself, tell everyone a little about the work you're doing, and you're more than welcome to take it from here.
Thank you. So as Dan said, I'm Claire Morris. I'm one of the innovation leads on the Bridge AI programme at Innovate UK. The Bridge AI programme launched in March this year, and it's a £100 million investment into stimulating the adoption of AI. Next slide, please. So I'll talk a bit about the motivation for the Bridge AI programme, what we're aiming to do, and some of the opportunities that are available to business at the moment and ongoing for the next 2 years. So the UK, we're really fortunate to have a thriving AI landscape. We're really world leading in terms of AI research, and we have more than 2,000 AI-centric companies working across 20 sectors. And we really are up there competing with the strongest in the world. And this is reflected in the amount of annual funding into the AI industry. So it's in excess of £3 billion per year, and that's increased rapidly over the past 5 years, given the upsurge in AI progress. But what we're seeing is that this isn't evenly distributed across the UK. So more than 65% of the UK's AI companies are headquartered in London. And although we're very good at the R&D elements and fundamental development of AI, we're less good at translating that into operations for certain businesses. Next slide, please. So what we've seen from a UK government perspective is that looking across the sectors and the availability of AI products from the supplier side, there's not an even supply across sectors. So it's a fairly small plot there, but if you can see at the top there, when we're looking at the breakdown of AI companies per sector, we've got marketing and advertising right at the top, and they're outstripping all other sectors by a fair margin, and then fintech, as you might expect. And then down at the bottom, we've got the likes of transport, construction, agriculture. And that's also reflected on the demand side. So again, we see uneven demand across sector, with IT and telecoms being the largest demanders, and then that tails off across a number of sectors. So why do we see this uneven supply and demand of AI products when there's a huge amount of excitement around AI, and we know that AI has the ability to improve productivity across businesses in many ways. And what we're looking at here is that some sectors really have unique challenges in terms of AI adoption. And so the Bridge AI programme is an intervention programme aimed at addressing some of those adoption barriers by providing holistic support in terms of grant funding and upskilling, training and advice to help with AI adoption in sectors that may be more risk averse, have more difficult health and safety problems, for example, to help drive that productivity and help all sectors gain from the increases in productivity that could be achieved from adopting AI. Next slide, please. So as I said here, Innovate UK's Bridge AI empowers UK businesses in sectors that have been identified as being high potential growth sectors, but low in terms of AI maturity. And we're looking to bridge that gap between developers and end users, so that developers are developing solutions that are really user-driven AI technologies. And as Erica pointed out, there are a number of difficulties and complications that still need to be worked through in the AI community. And we have a strong focus in the programme on ethics, transparency and data privacy, because one of those adoption barriers that we've seen is the trust and confidence in the AI solutions. And so we're doing that through providing upskilling opportunities across the workforce and aiming to strengthen the AI leadership across sectors. We're an Innovate UK funded programme, as I said, £100 million government investment, and it's delivered by a consortium of delivery partners, including Innovate UK, the Digital Catapult, the Alan Turing Institute, STFC, Hartree Centre and BSI. Next slide, please. So as I said, the programme has identified 4 key sectors that have been identified as having high growth potential but low adoption rates. And these are agriculture and food processing, transport, warehousing and logistics, construction and the creative industries. And we're offering funding and support to enhance the productivity and efficiency and help businesses in the UK stay ahead of the curve in a really competitive and increasingly competitive marketplace. And what we've seen is that although these are very different sectors, there are some common challenges across the board, but also very unique challenges per sector. And so we're trying to address both those horizontal adoption barriers and the verticals for each of the sectors to help with adoption. Next slide, please. So why construction? Well, construction is one of the largest sectors in the UK economy, but adoption of new technologies has been more challenging to implement for a number of reasons. And that there are a number of significant labour force challenges emerging. There are 2.15 million people employed in the industry, but we've got an ageing workforce, and 61% of that current workforce is expected to leave in the next decade. So AI has the potential to transform and invigorate the construction industry, and the contribution to the UK economy in 2021 from the construction industry was huge, so 116 billion. And there's a potential for that to be even larger with the adoption of AI. So we're looking to leverage the power of AI and machine learning across the construction industry to reduce waste and improve processes and accelerate project timelines to drive productivity across the sector. Next slide, please. So you can see there some of the opportunities if you scan the QR code. As I said, this is a holistic programme of support. So alongside the traditional Innovate UK grant funding opportunities via competitions, and you've heard from a couple of the companies who are being supported by that process, we're looking to foster that ecosystem of innovation as well. So we're looking to connect businesses in those priority sectors with AI experts to build an innovation community and help businesses adopt AI. We're looking to develop new trusted AI services and technologies. So looking at keeping pace and developing cutting edge technologies that are trustworthy, responsible, ethical, and allow co-creation between the supply and demand side. We're looking to elevate those high growth potential sectors, as I said, through training and upskilling. And one of the big issues that we've seen in terms of AI adoption is actually it's a confusing space to work in, even for AI experts, in understanding what do people mean when they're talking about AI, what is the return on investment, what's the risk in adoption, and actually what is that digital transformation process, what do I have to do in terms of business change management. And so there's a huge piece of training and upskilling to address, to allow companies to understand what the outlay is for adopting AI and what that potential return on investment is, and the business change needed to do that. We're also working to address standards gaps, so providing clarity and guidance in a really fast-paced, fast-moving field, and fast-tracking the development of appropriate standards to help transition some of this technology into operations within the construction sector. Next slide, please. So as I said, we've got a consortium of contributors. From the Innovate UK side, we're providing grant funding in the form of competitions. We're in the process of standing up an AI skills hub, which will be a single point of call to signpost interested parties to the relevant training opportunities and career pathways. We have a number of global innovation programs looking at collaboration with those industry leaders globally and introducing UK businesses to those international marketplaces to be included in incubator programs abroad. And we also have investment partnerships to partner up companies with the appropriate investors when they're looking to scale and grow their business. We have the Alan Turing Institute providing independent scientific advice, advanced AI skills training, and general advice around AI adoption using the Turing Way Practitioner Hub. And we also have collaboration with the AI Standards Hub, providing advice around AI governance and regulation. From the Digital Catapult, they're looking at the strategic ecosystem engagement. There's a number of industry toolkits, industry startup collaborations to address those business needs in understanding where am I in the AI adoption process and what do I need to do to get to where I want to be to have a solution in operations. And they help with the business and technology acceleration. We have the Hartree Centre, who are looking at industrial digitization acceleration. There's a number of innovation vouchers and access to HPC, so high power compute. And we have BSI, who are looking at that standards landscape review and gap analysis to help the construction sector and our other sectors have an easy access visualization of what the standards look like at the current time, and also developing standards to address those gaps. Next slide, please. So these are the milestones across the Bridge AI programme. We've had three competitions now launched. We've got a feasibility study projects which are currently ongoing, and we've had a trustworthy AI competition which is currently in its second phase, and we've just launched the collaborative R&D AI solution development for the sectors, which closed recently. So upcoming, we have another round of feasibility studies. So there's £5 million there, looking at short-term studies to test feasibility of potential solutions, and that will open in March this year. Alongside that, we have ongoing activities supported by the Alan Turing Institute, BSI, STFC Hartree Centre and Digital Catapult, alongside innovation network activities delivered by the Innovate UK KTM, running through to March 2026 when the programme closes. Next slide, please. So what have we got up and coming? So we have a number of 2 workshops that will be run by the Digital Catapult, the AI Innovation Workshop Series. We've had the first, which was very well received, and the next 2 will be on the 16th of January, and registration is currently open if you scan that QR code. So here we're looking to invite both developers and adopters from startups and small to medium enterprises. And the 2 workshops are focusing around minimum viable ethics, so how to responsibly innovate, what's the risk on innovation, and how do you address those ethical concerns when you're adopting an AI solution. And the second workshop is digital transformation, so data excellence and data ethics, touching on some of those issues that have been mentioned by our earlier speakers, looking at data quality, risks, and implementation techniques. So those are open for registration now. Next slide, please. As I said, the Hartree Centre have a number of innovation vouchers available. So the first high performance computing innovation voucher. So this is £5,000 worth of vouchers, access to compute power. And here this gives you the opportunity to access SCAFL and understand how and where the digital technologies like HPC can provide those transformative improvements in performance and productivity within your business. The second set of innovation vouchers are also live for applications at the moment. And this is more of a joint innovation process. So you'll get 8 to 10 days of effort from an AI technical expert from the Hartree Centre. That's available to either do kind of short feasibility studies, data review, AI integration advice, and problem assessment for your bespoke business needs. So please do have a look at those and express your interest if you have a problem that could be supported by access to those innovation vouchers. Next slide, please. Independent scientific advice. So this is a new piece of support being stood up by the Alan Turing Institute. And this is really trying to address those issues that the standard program solutions can't get to. So really intricate, complex AI problems and business dilemmas that really need that in-depth technical deep dive from some AI expertise. So the Turing Institute are setting up a panel of AI experts, and you'll gain that specialist support to get direct guidance tailored to your specific data science and AI adoption challenges. And they'll help you craft a strategic AI adoption plan backed by our panel of experts. So please do, again, there's still a few days left to express your interest for that, and there'll be another cohort running later in the programme. Next slide, please. Training. So as I said, we're aiming to train across the business portfolio, not just on the developer end, but look to train upskill from boots on the ground right up to C-suite and board level positions, so that everybody in the organisation understands the reasons for and against adopting AI and understands those risks and what the return on investment is. And there are a number of training opportunities available from the Alan Turing Institute and from the Hartree Centre. So please do sign up to those. They've had some very good feedback so far, looking into things like how data lies, how to assess and mitigate bias in your data, operationalizing ethics, and an introduction to transparent machine learning. So again, really driving home that focus that we have in the programme of developing trustworthy and responsible AI solutions that are ethical and transparent, so that we can build confidence in the market for end users. Next slide, please. We also have a number of resources that are online on the Bridge AI website. The first is an AI adoption assessment toolkit from the Digital Catapult. And this is a self-paced questionnaire, effectively a toolkit that will go through your industry, your business, and assess where you sit on the digital transformation scale in terms of infrastructure, in terms of skilling, and it will give you a rating and an idea of what you need to do to get to that next place in your journey, and that's openly available. We also have the Turing Commons, which is a general set of instructions into how to design and develop adopting AI solutions. And again, the Turing Way Handbook is also there, which is looking at open data science and how to adopt that into your business and best practices. Next slide, please. And that's it from me, from the Bridge AI programme. So I'm happy to take questions.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So what we'll do is we'll invite Dimitri and Erica to bring their cameras on, and we'll do questions together. So thank you for, so whilst Dimitri and Erica put their cameras on, I'll fumbly ask, obviously, we've got a raft of questions in so far, so we'll look at those as well as the pre-submitted questions. However, if there is a question you want to ask, I'll do my best to try and fit it in, because not all questions asked can be answered, particularly some of those that might be politically charged that I can see, I might have to skillfully ignore, but others I think certainly we can look at. Dimitri, I'm sure I've given you enough time to flick your camera on. I'll just give you a slightly more personal prompt for that. There we go, perfect. So in which way we'll start to look at some of these questions. And there's some quite interesting ones in here. I'll start with one more related to small businesses. I guess what we'll do is I'll lean it towards you, Claire, first. If anyone else wants to jump in, I think we'll do physical hands just so it's easier. So if I see someone put their hands up, I know they want to come in. And for both Erica and Dimitri's presentations, things like regulations and well, for now I'll call bureaucracy as heavily as hindrances in the way things work. And is it right to say that small businesses have freedom from that in a way, perhaps slightly more than others, when certainly, you know, I work in a rather large organization and I can't get things put on our website that I want. And you know, the other personal rants aside, from the way BSI works, surely small businesses actually are a bit freer from bureaucracy and these sorts of things, which might be the cause of productivity issues. So is that why one of the main reasons why it's good to target small businesses for this on this side of innovation and catalyzing them, because they have these more free? I don't know what your thoughts are on that, and then we can come to the other two.
Yeah, absolutely. I think small businesses can definitely be more agile, flexible, and have freedom in that respect to move at pace, especially in this industry. I think it does bring its challenges that being in a larger organisation doesn't, in terms of access to resource, potentially access to compute and access to skills. And that's why we're trying to support those small businesses that have the pace and ability to move at the same speed that the market's moving, essentially, and to bridge those gaps where large organisations may have an advantage in terms of capital. So that's certainly, from the Innovate side, why we'd like to support those small businesses.
No, but any other thoughts for either you, Erica, or you, Dimitri, on that? Yeah, go ahead, Erica.
Go ahead. Right. So we are a technology business, so I don't see us being freer, if you like, from regulation. But what I will say, because the AI regulation itself, AI standard regulations, is that this landscape is still very much being developed. I think we obviously regulation is always sort of behind the curve a little bit in terms of to particularly cutting edge technology. If you look at the rate of development, the pace of development, introducing services in the last 12 months, if you really look at the numbers, the number of companies, say, register with OpenAI as the AI developers, 2 million. Where do they come from? I mean, there is anyway, I shouldn't expand on that, but I'm saying that it's partly is to do with this particular space is still at its early days. But on the other hand, I think if you talk about a construction sector, small business, I really don't think they are free from the regulation, if you like, construction regulation. That's actually one of the challenges. Well, Dimitri actually very well positioned to answer. Very big challenges facing the smaller builders, the smaller developers. Actually, I wouldn't say stopping them, but obviously they need a much higher resource in terms of percentage investment into compliant with regulations and all that. Yeah, that's my view. Thank you.
Yeah, go on, Dimitri.
Yeah, I totally agree with Erica. AI-wise, with being a small business, yes, we can move fast, and it's not that difficult nowadays, especially prototyping is quite easy. But what the construction industry brings, sort of the additional requirements on you, is loads of things. As I mentioned with ESG, it's quite difficult to even figure out what is possible to do, let alone what outcome it's going to bring on your construction. Because if you essentially change one small bit in your construction process, this is going to bring huge consequences along the line of 30 years or even more of the building being used. So this is pretty interesting. This possesses a very interesting challenge of how you navigate it and where do you actually apply AI so that it makes sense. Because often case things like ChatGPT, it's quite difficult to control in terms of what it's suggesting. So it's quite difficult to make it stay within boundaries. And that's why often I'm saying that, do we actually need to go for this solution, or can we use some small set of smaller solutions that can be easier controlled?
No, great, thank you. And you know, I think going off of that, another question that's come in that links quite well to a pre-submitted question is that, and we'll start with you, Dimitri, on this, is that obviously when we talk about construction, there are obviously sub-domains for construction. And, you know, I tend to try and use the broader term built environment quite often, and people mix things, but generally you've got that kind of, you know, that architectural design sort of large clump of activity. You've got that kind of construction building activity. You have the specialists like fire and health and safety, which sit on the sides. You've then got the operational facility management aspect of it. So there are all these kind of large pockets of domains. And, you know, I guess the question is, how do you develop tools to be able to move between or integrate those kind of areas together? Because actually the language that an architectural professional might use versus how an asset manager or facilities manager talks about something could be quite difficult, different. And then the skewed perspective that you might get from someone like a fire engineer being very specific. How do we start to try and fit these together when some of them actually can be very different in that way? And does that fall under, I think, your framework from that generalization point of view? Because we could be scoping it into one space where actually it needs to be broader. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. That's a very interesting question. And in fact, we were calculating how many disciplines of professions you need to actually manage ESG. And we figured out that you typically need at least 40 different disciplines to be involved in the process throughout the project lifecycle from RIBA stage 0 to 7. And as you correctly mentioned, it is quite difficult to manage. And as I said in the presentation, creates vast amount of data and interactions, and not often, as again you say, those people can easily understand each other. And often people in offices who plan and strategize are quite different from people who are there building the building or maintaining it after it's been built. And our answer to that was essentially, it needs to be managed. It needs to follow project management principles to make sure that all of that can be managed. Currently, it's been done mostly with Excel. I think we did a questionnaire that turned out to be that more than 90% out of more than 100 companies still use Excel to manage all of these processes in terms of KPIs and other metrics like that. And then obviously emails to communicate between each other. And this creates a huge problem of traceability. It's very difficult to figure out what's actually been done and what's been said. So in our case, what we came up with is the first element of our solution, which is the platform where you could easily and simply and consistently define, we call them essentially KPIs, but they include clear roles and responsibilities that keep people accountable across the entire project pipeline from Rebus Stage 0 to Rebus Stage 7, where people know exactly what actions are expected from them, when they're expected, and when submitting the evidence, it's always recorded, and you require approval from your project manager, so however the project is set out to be. So my answer would be to navigate this differences in communication, you would need traceability. And as long as you can trace what's been done, you, one way or another, you can figure out what went wrong or whether you're still moving in the right direction. So for me, it's traceability is the key there.
No, that's great. Thank you. A couple of questions have come through about finding out, because we've talked about implementation of AI in construction, the built environment, and where can people find out where or what such products are. Now, I think we're not going to sit here and name products now, but one, I don't think that's helpful, and two, I think it may be obvious that we've got two very helpful people, you know, who have come to speak where they could find out more. But I guess, Claire, there's probably a wealth of other organizations who are doing stuff with the Bridge AI program. So I'm just wondering, how do people get exposed to either those organizations or the outputs that are coming out of that work? And maybe that's a good place to start, aside from using the QR codes we've seen from Erica and Dimitri.
Yeah, sure. And this is one thing where Innovate UK KTN can help. So they have a network across the sector of academics and businesses who'll be able to put you in touch with kind of the wealth of technology and expertise that exists on the market. Second to that, there was a Transforming Construction competition run under Innovate, and there's an open website that summarizes, I think there's about 100 projects and use cases of AI in the last 5 years that's been applied in construction, and they're very good. We've got the Catapult network associated with Innovate UK. So the digital Catapult will be able to put you in touch with kind of the new digital advances. The Connected Places Catapult have got a lot of experience in the built environment. And contact through Innovate UK KTN or myself through the Bridge AI team. We can put you in contact with those people. There's also obviously the Digital Twin Hub, which is very relevant in this space, and they can point you in the direction of some of the products. I think that's probably it off the top of my head, but if I've missed any, then do let me know.
That's right. That's a wealth of places there. Dimitri, did you have somewhere else, did you? Or was that a hand up, or did I?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to Claire's list. First of all, it's quite hard to remember all of this, so I appreciate it. One good place is UK Green Building Council Solution Library that I would recommend too. They've got quite a few solutions for especially green and building related things.
No, brilliant, thank you. And obviously for those asking those sort of questions in the chat, because it's on demand, you can go back and re-listen to Claire's answer to pick up all those different resources, and we might try and summarize it afterwards, because I know that there were some slides on those bits, which is great. Erica, I'll start with you on this one, and then anyone else can jump into it. Obviously, a lot of your focus was on that project-based element, and obviously one of the ways that we've tried to do data and information and structure and the more digital stuff for projects has been the whole BIM, building information modeling bit. And I guess some of the questions are kind of alluding to how does BIM fit into some of this, because in theory people could be getting structured data from their projects, and could that be a good input into some of these solutions, particularly when you have things like COBie and things like IFC data sets and those sorts of things. So, or is this more, as you sort of started pointing out, you have the more natural language processing, and actually, does it really matter if it's structured or not in that sense? What are your views on that? And then I guess anyone else can jump in afterwards.
Starting from the end, you mentioned, does it has to be structured data or not? So that the short answer is no, it doesn't have to be a structured data. So this is perhaps one of the biggest changes that bring on this, what I call this new AI bring onto the table. It's not saying that NLP and all that doesn't exist before. I think it's a sort of a new phase of its life, if you like. Second is that about the BEAM and other sort of similar sort of initiatives and all that. There is a whole spectrum of BEAM related projects and data out there. They are very relevant actually. BEAM itself is actually, yes, it's not about just about tech. It's mostly it's about 3D model, isn't it? About buildings and all that. People are, in short, people are using BEAM data in combination with project management data to help understand project risks, project dispute. When there is a dispute, people are trying to use that for dispute prevention, dispute resolution and all that. That's a big movement actually out there. We recently went to a construction dispute conferences, BEAM actually being mentioned as one of the big source of data helping people to identify the conflicts or identify issues. Yes, in short, yes, there is a big element, role for BEAM to play. It doesn't have to be language or human language alone. Yeah.
No, great, thank you. And I guess I'll pivot it slightly and lean at you, Claire, with this in a way, is that arguably, depending on who you speak to, BIM has either done really well and loads of people are doing it, or it's not gone as far as it needs to. So what lessons can we learn from that for AI? And is the Bridge AI program one attempt at doing that? Is it some of the catapult work? How do we learn the lessons from that as a what we might call a moderately successful IT implementation and built environment? How do we build off of that, do you think?
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot that we can learn, and I think in the Bridge AI program we're probably still in the early stages of navigating that journey with the sector of how we do better. But I think one of the initial feelings that have come back from at least the kind of construction companies that we've spoken to is that there's something to be done on the client side as well. So what people are asking for in terms of their contracts, and making sure that the kind of legal and commercial people are upskilled so that they can understand what they're procuring and make that easier when they're specifying contracts for AI solutions. So we're looking at that as well. It's a complex space that we're still trying to navigate, and if the sector has any ideas of how we should be doing this better, we'd be very grateful to hear them, because I don't think there's an easy answer to this.
No, great, thank you. Another question I've got, which I'm going to modify slightly, but I think still relevant, is that I think it's alluding, I believe, towards your presentation, Dimitri, but I think we can generalize it for everyone, which is how do you decide whether to include historic specific build data or not within data sets? Because on the one hand, you'll have buildings that have been built to what would now be non-conforming requirements, so you could train it on something that's no longer permissible, but at the same time there are really good heuristics that would have been developed in the sense of, there's some really good work in the 70s around sustainable housing, and there's work on things like the active building centers and those sorts of things. So how do you decide what to train the data on, given that there's a risk that there could be some valuable stuff in there, but while also not meeting existing requirements, and what does that look like? And maybe Dimitri, we'll start with you, but I think everyone can jump on this one.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, actually. I wish I had a clear answer, but what I would do if I put the hat of machine learning engineer on, I would say you've got to be aware of the potential issues. Then you've got to make sure your monitoring is set up to account for this. So you've got to make sure to track these drifts in performance, and you need to know where to expect them from. And this comes from the initial stages of data analysis. So you need to sort of look at your data and try to see as many potential issues as possible before you actually deploy your models. And when monitoring, you've got to obviously define the monitoring requirements clearly to say that even though the previous data has those instances when buildings were built for other regulations, we now are building for these regulations, and we cannot breach those particular requirements. So it's all about the system management. And as I say, with AI, the trick is how do you keep it within certain bounds and not going too crazy too often.
No, that's fair. Anyone want to add any more to that? Otherwise, I've got one final question. No, okay, fab. So, in which case, the final question, and it'll be a quick answer off each of you. If I was, as Dan, starting a small business looking to do some, I won't say AI, to be a data-driven business that utilizes AI technologies in it, what is the first step you think I should take on this journey? And can I get one quick answer off of each of you? And it could be visit a website, read a book, do a thing, you know, it's open to whatever. And maybe I'll start with you, Dimitri.
Yeah, I'd say talk to as many potential customers as you can before doing anything.
Fab, yeah, talk to your customer base, brilliant. Erica, how about you?
Have a data inventory list. Have a dynamic data inventory list.
Okay, brilliant. Perfect, thank you. And Claire, how about you?
Engage with the programme and a range of experts to help advise.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you all very much. Right, from a time perspective, that's all we've got for the Q&A. So thank you, Claire, Erica, and Dimitri, one for your presentations and two for joining for the Q&A. You're more than welcome to turn your cameras off and jump off now. For everyone else, what we're going to do is we're going to have a very short comfort break. It's going to be until 10:02, so that gives you 9 minutes to make yourself a cup of tea, stretch your legs, do whatever you need to. This comfort break is for me as much as it is for anyone else. And to make a note that what we're going to do in the chat is share details to a Miro board, which is going to be the basis of the second part of this session. So once you come back at 10:02, there's going to be a small Miro board session we're going to be running. The link has been put in the chat so you can have a look at it. Please don't start playing with it until we've had the opportunity to introduce it and explain what we want to do. But in what is now 8 minutes time, we'll jump back in. We'll introduce the session alongside Jill, who will be helping to facilitate it, and then we'll see what we can get as useful feedback from yourselves. I hope you've enjoyed so far, and we'll see you in about 8 minutes time. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and I hope you've had a pleasant comfort break. I myself personally went off, gave the puppy some much needed attention, and have stretched my legs, made myself a brew, and have come back. And we are now going to move on to the interactive part of the afternoon. Hopefully you've had a chance to look in the chat and pick up the Miro board link. I think what we'll do is we'll ask the team to repost it in, I think it might be the newest message, but just in case, re-stick it in so you can see. And it requires a password. That password is BSI Summit with a capital S on Summit, all one word. You should be able to see it on the screen as well. And part of that, and part to help me, is I've got a colleague alongside to help support. So Jill, would you like to say hello and introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks, Dan. Hi, everyone. My name is Jill Jackson. I'm the Senior Research and Insight Manager at BSI. So shall we kick off then?
By all means.
Right. So basically, I mean, Claire has given a great overview of the Bridge AI programme. And as she mentioned, BSI has been a major partner in that. So as part of the first kind of range of activities, we conducted some research. We did some interviews and some workshops with key industry stakeholders. And the objectives of the research was really to explore the challenges that industry were facing. We were looking at it from a developer and a deployer's point of view, and also to help identify where standardization could best support. So we identified a range of different challenges. If you sort of move just down the board a little bit, Dan, the main kind of, we've categorized the challenges into 4 main stages, which are kind of classic digital adoption journey. So the first stage being, to strategize, thinking about identifying the objectives of what you're trying to achieve, working with agreed terminology, that's both in-house and externally with clients and or suppliers, ensuring explainability to make sure that all methods are fully understood across the business, and that helps limit vendor lock-in. Second stage being data collection, basically establishing that data foundation, accessing quality data for the AI model testing and training data, and obtaining consistent data formats from multiple sources to ensure that interoperability. Then moving on to stage 3, the organise stage, so progressing with the model development and evaluation, and that's all about developing safe, secure and trustworthy models, and that includes things like establishing sort of data sharing agreements. And then the final stage is the implementation, so actually deploying the AI model, and that's really about operationalizing it across the business and maintaining trust. And what we've often heard is kind of this aftercare, a bit like if you bought a car, but different. So yeah, establishing those sorts of frameworks. So what we'd like you to do today, part of this interactive session, is we've got 3 tasks for you. The first one is to look at these challenges. We really want to validate some of the challenges that came out of the research. And just, what we're going to do is do a voting exercise in Miro, and I'll ask you to, I'm going to give you 5 votes. So just looking down the list, the sorts of things that we've come across in the research, the terminology came up quite frequently, a need for greater sort of terminology definitions around it. There was certainly a bit of confusion over exactly what constitutes AI amongst some of the stakeholders that we spoke to. Looking at the commercial models, especially I think within the built environment, there was some feeling that the current commercial models didn't necessarily encourage innovation and change. That was a challenge that came out. Various, cost, having a demonstrable return on investment, that was a real barrier. And then moving into data collection, quite a lot of challenges there, but essentially just collating and gathering this data to train and test the models was proving quite problematic for a lot of participants. The interoperability aspect was a real frustration, trying to get, all the data was held in multiple locations, multiple suppliers, and the consistency of the formats was generally poor. There was issues around the sort of digital assets, you know, lots of kind of, you know, still paper versions of important documentation, the need to digitize all that. Also mentioned about, you know, standards and PDF, but formats of standards wasn't necessarily particularly helpful, and that is work in progress, I can assure you. The data security, the privacy of data was also raised, especially, you know, when dealing with large volumes of data, sort of sending data to third-party providers and that sort of thing. There was some feeling of a lack of data standards, and specifically sector-specific standards. There was sometimes they sort of talked about barriers in terms of, you know, there was inadequate data management practices within organisations. Moving on to the stage 3, the bias model evaluation, exactly the parameters, boundaries of what to look for, and what to, you know, everything there. The model transparency and explainability, you know, it should be properly documented, and all the technical processes of the sort of AI system, having that explainable so that people could actually understand. Things like consistency of output, there was a lack of that. Big issues around the legal liability, very complex barrier, which I think Claire alluded to, that, you know, it's an ongoing debate around that. And then human in the loop, lots of conversations there around the sort of intersection between the data challenges and how much human involvement in interaction would be required to ensure that level of accuracy and consistency. And then the final stage, the implementation. So, you know, the model evaluation by deployers, and in some cases there was solutions, the sort of outcomes were misaligned with expectations. Sometimes deployers didn't feel that the companies really understood the use cases properly, and so delivered solutions that could have been more robust or relevant. Auditability came up quite a lot, which, you know, is work in progress, and the new standard ISO 42001 is, you know, going to be a certifiable standard, but that's certainly a need and a challenge out there. Lots of siloed software solutions, especially concerns for smaller businesses. Lots of software packages don't integrate, and they're all kind of operating on, you know, proprietary software, which was a real headache. Hardware integration, physical security of hardware, things like that. And then lots of discussions around regulations, you know, kind of people crying out for that to be sorted out and established and aligned globally as well. That was a clear need. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just set up a voting window. Just give me 1 second to do that. So I'm going to give you 5 votes each, and I'd like you to just allocate your 5 votes into the challenges that you've either experienced or that you feel are most important to you. So you should see a voting session window start. Please join that.
Yeah, I can see that now. Thank you for that, Jill. And obviously all the votes are anonymous in that way, so feel free to vote as honestly as you like. I think you can see my screen. So for the sake of not messing with the data, I'm just going to click I'm done. But for everyone else, you see that all you have to do is click on one of the pluses to do your respective votes in that way. So I will avoid biasing the data.
Thanks, Dan.
And it'll be interesting to see what people come up with, because I can imagine with a wealth of different people on the call, they'll have all quite different experiences. Although if it's any indication, I can see lots of hands floating around on various different topics. You know, someone's there on governance and regulation, so we'll see how well that pops up in a second.
Yeah, certainly got some votes coming down. Oh yeah, we're getting there. And it's obviously, I appreciate, you know, this is just kind of a few words. I've done my best to elaborate where possible on what's behind these headers. So, you know, it's not ideal. Normally it's a bit more interactive verbally, but yeah.
No, it's no problem. And then, of course, anyone who's either finished voting or doesn't feel they are fully represented, there's a small space on the right where you could steal a post-it note from the challenges below and maybe add an extra challenge. If you think there's actually something that you've struggled with that isn't reflected in this list, you're more than welcome to use that white space there to drop something in as well.
Right, okay, so everyone's finished voting. So I can, integration has come up top. Then there's lots of ones with kind of equal votes. So AI skills and resource gaps has come up, equally rated with ROI and cost. Data quality is also up there, as is confidence levels. And then we drop down into sort of government regulations and limited awareness of the value of data. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just to move.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, because at least from my point of view, we know that in construction, the built environment, skill shortage is a real problem for traditional skills, let alone something new and nascent like AI. I think we touched on it a little in the Q&A and stuff, where it's quite difficult for data people to understand how complex construction is, and likewise it's quite difficult maybe for construction people to understand how complex information science is. So I can see why that's there, although I imagine the skill shortage there is even shorter, which is interesting. I wonder if data quality and confidence are two sides of the same coin in that respect, because obviously if it's not very good data, you're not going to have much confidence in it. But it's interesting to see how those have come together there. And we have talked a bit about governance and regs through today, so it's interesting that that is reflective on the way that's been working. So there are some good ones there. So thank you for dropping those in the way that we work. It is interesting how we've managed to get consensus on a couple of these while also having that quite broad range of bits in there. Have I bought you enough time there, Jill, or do you need a bit more time?
I'm nearly done.
That's all right. So what I'll start describing in a way, because what Jill's hopefully doing is taking the best answers that you guys have put, so things like integration and the ROI and costs, and it's being populated into the second session so that we can focus on that a little. So in doing so, then we can drill down into why you've picked those, and start to flip it from a problem statement into a bit of a solution statement in that way. And I'm probably stealing all of Jill's explanation for the next session.
No, that's perfect. Thanks, Dan. Right, I've done. Okay, so what I've done is just lifted the key challenges that came out into these little boxes. So this is kind of free text styly. How do we solve these things? I mean, there's lots of possible solutions, a lot of which is being worked on. There's lots of working groups, committees, different activities. Obviously, Claire's gone through as well. There's lots of things that are happening. What would you like to see? What ideas have you got where you think some of these challenges could be mitigated? So I've moved the top ones across, but if you don't feel like answering any of them, don't feel particularly duty bound to, you can just move a post-it into a free text area and just whatever your particular frustration is, then do feel free to write it. Although regulations and governance was in the top group, I actually haven't put it on here because there's not a lot we can do about that. So we're kind of, it's a bit of a waiting game in terms of the government's regulations. There's obviously been the release of the white paper, and so that's in hand. So I haven't put that on here. I think these are, I'd like to be able to add things on that we can influence.
Yeah, that's right. They are. Yeah, they're more pragmatic, which is perfect.
Yeah.
So how long are we going to give people for this, Jill?
10 minutes? Yeah.
We'll say 5-10 minutes, and obviously if it starts to slow down after 5, then we can look at it. But the short answer is have at it. So I see you're all waiting patiently, and start dropping some post-its on, and then if we see anything interesting, we will maybe start talking about them. So feel free to throw post-its on and give us your thoughts.
Or indeed ask any questions about the challenges broadly. Okay, no solution ideas as yet.
Well, people might be busy typing into their post-its, I think, so that's okay, because I think you can't see the live text edit, so that's all right.
Oh, yeah.
But we'll see how we're doing. I mean, not to pick on names, I saw Anthony Brophy flying around, and I noticed he's not dropping any post-it notes down, so you're more than welcome to drop something in. I guess we'll see what comes up. There are at least 40 of us on this call, so I don't know whether everyone has joined the Miro board or not, but I'll encourage anyone who isn't on there, if you look at the chat for GoToWebinar, you'll be able to see it and be able to drop stuff in, and we'll start working on it that way. So just scroll back through the chat, have a look at the link, drop your passwords in, and you should be able to start to play as everyone else is doing, as I can see a bunch of mice flying around the screen. And you start to see people dropping a few things on, which is excellent.
Nice to see that standards has come up in the integration challenge. Obviously, yeah, that's a key area where standards can help, and certainly partly the interesting thing is we've looked at the 4 sectors, and some standards exist, sort of interoperability standards exist for some sectors but not others. So part of our work will be looking to align all the sectors so that there are consistent data formats.
Yeah, and interestingly, when because I'm cool, I like to read standards in my free time, and one that I thought actually worked quite well. There was a cloud computing standard on interoperability that was quite fascinating, I think, when I looked through it, and having that sort of thing, perhaps outlining an interoperability framework for AI, could be quite interesting. But I think what we're going to find is the struggle is going to be having things that are relevant for the way people want to use things, I expect, because construction is quite specific, as we heard about from Erica and Dimitri in that way. So it's how you tie these things together, but still have something that's standardized, I think will be quite interesting. And likewise, I see collaboration and interoperability have both come into that challenge there, which aren't surprising. So obviously we just talked about interoperability a bit there, but collaboration is quite an interesting one, and I guess it takes a village to achieve things quite often, and as Claire mentioned, one way of collaborating with people probably is actually through something like the Bridge AI program. Because in that way you're able to meet either like-minded people or connect up to those various organizations who are part of it, like the Alan Turing Institute and ourselves, to try and connect up in that sort of way.
Yes, indeed, and it came through quite strongly in the research, the need for knowledge sharing platforms to not only sort of disseminate knowledge, but as an opportunity to collaborate and learn, to share cross-sector, cross-sectorial sort of views as well. So you're not just siloed in your own sector, but actually learn some good practice from other sectors. is also a valuable need. And I think that's the good thing about the Bridge AI programme. It does have a portal which will have all this information on it. So that's going to be good.
No, certainly. And I think while we're going, I can see some other bits coming in, and a couple of common themes are coming in. So I can see one person's talked about specific training, while someone else has talked about capacity building. So I think gaining awareness is going to be quite good. And actually, while people are typing, can I just double check what training or capacity is that giving people? Giving construction people AI skills, or is it giving AI people construction skills? Is it both or neither? If you could clarify on your post-its, training in what skill or building capacity in what kind of skill specifically, that would be super helpful.
And can I also, someone's put down a post-it, technical support and advice in the AI skills column. Could I ask you to expand on what you mean by that?
Yeah, so the more specific you are on your post-its, the more we can follow up on these and feed them back afterwards. Because we're a part of this work, it's also helpful for you guys to know what we're going to use this feedback for. We are writing a report back into the Bridge AI program about various bits and pieces, so we can actually use your feedback here and feed that into the report. So the more specifics you are, the more people will see it, and maybe the better chance of it happening, which is always a positive with some of this. Whilst people are helpfully making their training ones a bit more specific, let's have a look at some of those later challenges. Oh, there we are. I wasn't zoomed in enough, and there's a massive post-it there. What do we think, Jill, about data value versus ethics?
Yeah.
Have you a chance to read that one yet? I haven't.
No, I'm just reading it. Yes, okay. I'm not entirely sure is the honest answer.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, and I think this is where this is why Claire mentioned the importance of ethics being a key cornerstone of something like the program, and you could see how it could always be used in quite a poor way. The one I remember, which isn't quite, it's sort of an implementation of AI, was when Microsoft created a bot that went on Twitter, and within 24 hours, I think Twitter had taught it how to be very rude. Is the polite way I'll say it for this call. So unfortunately, there's a lot of value in social media, but that allowed it to proliferate. I'm trying to say proliferate. There we are. Poor practices used on the internet. So there are considerations needed when it comes to using the data in a ethical and kind of robust way.
And this is why sort of governance is so important, and why there's such a push to try and get standards established as soon as possible. So unlike a lot of previous areas where you maybe would wait for best practice to be established by industry, that we can't take the chance with AI. So there has to be guardrails put in place up front rather than waiting for a natural adoption curve and like the Betamax and VHS scenario for it just to naturally fall out. One doesn't want that to happen. We've got to put the guardrails up already, and that's why there's so much work being done in standards up front.
I'm really pleased to see that people are warming up to chucking stuff on, which is exactly what we wanted. And interestingly, in the data quality realm, I can see questions basically being asked about good practices. Really, how can data quality be controlled, and could something like BIM be brought in, where BIM was very much about specifying how you want that data generated and structured to give you that element of data quality. So I guess in a weird way, where does traceability and that governance bit fit onto the quality. So how do you know you've been given good data to use or not?
Yeah, and BIM has, was it, I heard the other day, the poster boy of standards. Don't know if they were talking about you, Dan, or just sort of built environment specifically, but because of the regulations and the BIM integration, it's really slightly further ahead than some of the other sectors, which is really positive, and there's lots of learnings that can be shared across.
No, it is, and of course the frightening thing I heard the other day was someone, a friend of mine who works in construction, got a chance to work on an aerospace project, and he discovered how not great they are at structuring their information and their document management stuff. So while they've been hailed as experts in some of this, we as construction might be ahead of them in some of that data quality and structuring, which is a scary thought, considering how poorly we do some stuff. Looking back at the training, yeah, here we are. So how do we train the built environment to understand value and opportunities with AI? Give them the language to be able to work with software developers. Yeah, so it ties back to that collaboration bit of, if you're going to be bespoke in a solution for someone, they need the language and they need the know-how to be able to explain what they want. I think is a nub of that in a way. You can't really say, give me. So say if we as BSI went out and said, we want a large language model of our standards content, that's we probably need to use more specific language to say which bits are in and which bits are out, to make it usable and workable. So how do we train people to know what to ask for? I think is a pretty good question.
Yeah.
Have you spotted anything else interesting, Jill, as I scroll around the challenge?
Slightly perturbed by the person who's put, I am lost. I think we need to reach out. Lost about the awareness of the value of data, I hope.
Well, we'll see, but obviously if someone does feel they are lost, they can ask questions in the GoToWebinar question box, and we'll do the best to find them. Or likewise, they can reach out afterwards in the Q&A, and we can always email them back to help out.
I think it's a good point. What problem are we looking to solve by using AI tools? On the last challenge, limited awareness of value of data, that came up in the research as well. A lot of the developers I spoke to said, there's such a buzz around AI. People feel that they need it, but they're not entirely sure why and what problem they're trying to solve. And until you get to that point, you're not going to have an optimum model. You've got to have a very clear idea of the objectives, which I thought was an interesting point.
No, it is interesting. I think this is why I occasionally call the magpie problem, where people might be attracted to it because it's new and shiny, but purpose-driven, I think, tends to be the sort of phraseology we want. Is that we want people to know what's the purpose of the tech that's been built to support them, and how that fits in. Now, interestingly, I see those two big post-its around knowledge sharing and an information hub. And I guess I wanted to test with whoever wrote those. When we say information hub, do we almost mean a place where people can get good quality data, so a hub for information you might train something on, or is it a hub of useful information of how to do AI and the value for things? Because I think those could be two very different things. They both sound useful, perhaps. So we'll give that a little to see if anyone writes any extra bits in.
Yeah, and then there's an interesting one on challenge 5. Should AI tools be built if the source of the data used isn't transparent? It's a big issue, the whole IP, copyright of data, where it's come from, what's in the data, knowing the source. it's probably, I mean, it's one of the main challenges in the creative industries, but certainly it transcends sector and affects all of the sectors, including built environment.
I mean, a weird question I'll ask, and if people want to drop maybe post-its in challenge 4 as an answer to this, is would you want the tools to have some form of certification or something on them, or would you want the data to have certification on it in a way? And I'm not saying, you know, a BSI kite mark, other certification organizations are available. We're not trying to pick a sub vendor, but is it more valuable for the product to be certified that it's, say, only taking things that are transparent, or is it better for the data sets to have that certification? And then people could cite that they've used certified data in their solution. I wonder what people's preference from a data quality point of view. That, I don't know if you could tell, Jill, that was me trying to ask a question. We're trying very hard not to have a commercial leaning on that.
I know, it was almost like you worked for the BBC for a minute.
Well, the classic one is if the BBC gets complaints off both sides, they know they've done a good job. So,
can you help me, Dan? What on the challenge 3 ROI, use AI for TBTs? What do you know what they are?
I know what TBMs are, which are either temporary benchmarks or tunnel boring machines, if you're onto the inside joke for some construction things. But I'm not sure what a TBT is. That might just be my my naivety. So whoever talked about the use of AI for TBTs, rather than me Googling the answer, if you wanted to expand on what that is, that would be fantastic. I'd say in this world, there are no silly questions. The only silly questions are the ones you don't ask. So we'll see what comes back to that. Toolbox talks, brilliant. Thank you for that. Yeah, so could we use AI for things like those initial morning briefings on construction sites and those sorts of things, where you could be talking about where activities are taking place, what plants coming in, and those sorts of things. That's certainly a good idea in that sort of way. And I guess from an ROI cost point of view, it might be quite difficult to work out the value, hence why it's fitted in there. Because those talks are incredibly important to make sure for safety and everything happens, and we know how expensive issues on construction sites can be in that sort of way. So that's a very good point to stick on there, so thank you. You know, some sort of fire safety refresh talk or something could benefit maybe from some of this, depending on the right data was there for it, of course. Brilliant, and these are filling up quite a lot, so I think we're doing pretty well here.
Yeah, slow start, but we've done well. I'm surprised there's not more in ROI and cost. I suppose maybe it's just a difficult challenge to solve.
I mean, while people think and may want to start chucking stuff in, something I was reading earlier today was a lot about you need new solutions to fix new problems in that sort of way. So is it perhaps that it's quite hard to quantify what it's going to be used on, particularly when people have talked about the confidence levels and the data quality? So it makes it quite hard perhaps to talk about the ROI cost element to it. And I mean, aside from the normal, you know, it's expensive to buy all the software or run the subscriptions and those sorts of things. But we'll see now. I mean, Ant's listening intently and he's starting to write something for us, which is very helpful of him. And we'll see who else drops some things in. While he does that, let's float around a bit. And should we say, what, 2 more minutes on this, Jill?
Yes, yeah, that sounds good.
Just to see, maybe start summarizing some of the stuff that we're seeing, just to make sure that that's fine. So working backwards, challenge 6, it is interestingly both that idea of sourcing information and could there be some sort of knowledge platform and stuff that would help. this idea of the ethics and the fitness for purpose of stuff. So that might reflect into use cases perhaps, and what data might be applicable for what use case is sort of the thing I'm pulling out of that. Any other insights you can see from 6?
No, I think that's good.
How would you sum up 5, Jill?
Confidence levels. So looking at, I mean, sort of it's the competencies come out quite strongly, hasn't it? Making sure that defining what you're trying to solve and then actually building that competency.
Yeah, I think there seems to be a big sub layer for trust as well in there, because people are looking for whether the transparency aspect and things, and it's probably not for today, but there's a very interesting debate of the relationship between transparency and trust, because one idea is that transparency is the opposite of trust, because if you trusted something, it wouldn't need to be transparent. So is there no trust, which is why we need data transparency? But that's a longer debate for another topic. Data quality.
The extent to which you need to be transparent as well, depending where you're sitting on the either development side or the deployment side, different levels of transparency are important.
No, certainly. And then I think from a data quality point of view, I think it's that how do you ensure the quality in that way? And interestingly, we've got one post-it where people have said it should be the data sets that are certified or assured, and someone else who said the product. So there's not consensus there, which I think is quite interesting.
Yeah.
And a very good point there on challenge 3, which is you could compare using AI tools alongside traditional methods to compare time and cost. It reminds me a bit of, and this will cause nostalgia in some people's minds, the old Avanti program. So for those who might remember, in the early 2000s, there was, and I believe it was Innovate funded at the time, alongside the DTI, set of research looking at ICT-based collaboration, which was BIM before it was BIM, where they did actually compare traditional projects to using this IT-based collaboration. Actually, do we need those sorts of case studies? It's probably quite an interesting question. And then I think we've got challenges 1 and 2 to go. So what do you think about the skills and resourcing, Jill?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. There's specific training aimed at individual requirements, and just even matching, you could use AI to match gaps in skills to it's a bit linked into the competency. So yeah, it's a really interesting point. I think certainly the Bridge AI program is looking at this in a lot of detail, and Turing are doing some great work. So there's lots of really cool sort of assets available on that website.
And then obviously finally then for challenge 1, that integration bit, people have started talking about interoperability, and perhaps one of our favorite subjects being standards. And I think what that probably does, and you'll now see why I went in reverse order, segues us probably quite nicely to our 3rd activity, doesn't it?
It does. God, seamless, Dan. Okay, so finally moving down, as part of the BSI support for the Bridge AI program, we're looking at offering a kind of package of support, of standard support for industry. In the new year, we'll be working on data visualization tools that basically help to surface and signpost standards, and we're kind of useful categorizations and surfacing all the sort of relevant standards for AI solutions. So it would be good for us to get an idea of your awareness of some of these key AI and data standards. These aren't specific standards for the built environment. These are more sort of general cross-sector, sort of horizontal standards. So we're going to do 2 voting exercises. The first round of voting, which I'll start imminently, is going to be which standards are you actually aware of. So if you could have a look at all these standards, and then I'll just start the voting now. So if you just sort of click on which ones you've actually you're aware of, and then the second round of voting will be ones that you're actually interested in finding out more about, and then that can feed into our sort of next package of standard support that we're going to offer next year.
Yeah,
and then obviously talk through some of these standards, do you, Dan?
Well, we could talk a bit about the task generally, and looking at this, you can see lots of interesting ones on there. Not all the numbers have appeared on some of them, like some of the big data ones, but we can hopefully through the title you can maybe work out what some of them are. I mean, I'll admit that even as a BSI person, I've not come across all of these standards, so it's about just trying to look at where we think you guys are aware of bits and pieces and to see. And again, I won't bias it, so I'm just going to click I'm done now, or we can already see that a bunch of people are starting to check results in. And obviously, if you haven't heard of them, if you could join the vote, just click I'm done, because you've not been made aware of them, then that's perfectly okay as well. But you can see there's some interesting ones around AI bias and stuff you may not have come across. But then perhaps something like the big data standard for data-driven projects, part 1 and part 2, one for data-driven organizations, one for data-intensive projects, may be something that you've come across. Interestingly, I think when we've run these sort of sessions before, people often know of the big ticket standards, your 9000s, your 27000s, your 19650s if you're BIM inclined. But actually, when we start to go into more specific standards, people may not always know what they are. So it's helpful for us, because if we find out none of you know what these standards are, then we need to do more promotion and more discovery about them, because standards like data quality for analytics and machine learning might be what's needed. Oh, and well timed. Here are some results.
Right, so top of the list is the DevOps information technology, closely followed by AI risk management.
Well, that's good.
And then the 42001 that's not quite published, hopefully in the new year.
But it's great to see people are hearing about the standards under development as well, which is good.
Yeah, that's really good. And then the AI data quality for analytics and machine learning. Then the risk management, a few people have heard of that. And brilliant. The software testing. Okay, so that's good. So now let's just run the same thing again, but actually ones that you would like to get some information on in the new year.
Yeah, so vote 1 was, have you heard of it? Vote 2 is, which ones do you want to hear more about, isn't it?
And then throughout next year, BSI is going to be launching some, well, yet to be established exactly, but webinars, training sessions. For some Bridge AI successful applicants, there'll also be one-to-one support being offered. So if you are going to submit an application or have already, that could be something that you could benefit from. But otherwise, there'll be small group support or just sort of general self-help that you can go on and self-serve. Okay, we're getting there.
No, it's good, and it'll be interesting to see, because you can almost imagine it would be the inverse of what we just saw, but actually there may be some standards in there people like, well, I haven't heard of it, and actually it doesn't sound that interesting to me. In which case, could we be missing the mark on some of these standards?
Yeah, and the age-old problem, you need to see a bit more of the scope in order to truly know if you're going to be interested in the standard, so we appreciate that. And then the data visualization tool that we'll be building next year will contain the sort of detailed scope of the standard. So, you know, you'll be able to, there'll be a multi-hierarchical categorization system whereby you can look at fine standards depending on, well, yet exactly to be determined, but possibly by process stage, by your activity, your role, or your application level, or sort of high level thematic area. So we're looking at categorizing them in various different ways.
Well, there we are. We have some clear winners, Jill.
We do. Right, top of the list is AI bias. Well, joint winner actually with governance of IT. Then the 42001, the management system, and the data quality. All the data qualities are coming in 5th place. AI trustworthiness, and yeah, that's very interesting, right? And AI robustness also. Okay, well, great, thank you. We'll take all that information away, and we'll start looking at the plan of works for next year, and hopefully create a standard support plan which will suit.
Yes, brilliant. So I guess a quick thank you to you, Jill, for running this session. As Jill mentioned, we'll use this feedback to, 1, inform our reports, and 2, inform our comms for next year. So hopefully you'll see more on the other standards. So what I'll do is I'll slowly ramble my way into having my closing slides put up in that way. So hopefully in a couple of minutes or 2, you will start to see as we get to the end of today's session, as if by magic, there they appear. So what I want to do is just do a very quick thank you to our speakers. Obviously Jill, Claire, Erica, Dimitri, in that way, that they've put some excellent presentations down, and there's been some really good feedback from you guys in the questions box saying how well you've enjoyed today, so thank you for that. As I mentioned, it'll be on demand, so you can go look at the previous today's presentation, share it with friends, do everything else, and if you were to do the feedback forms afterwards for us, rest assured everyone reads the feedback. We can then make sure that we can ensure our events are good and build on the way going forward. So please do that, which gives you access to those links and any CPD certificates for yourselves. There's been an awful lot of AI knowledge that has come out of that, so hopefully there's plenty for you to distill into. But I think the summary that we heard from our panel earlier of speak to your clients, keep a kind of digital asset inventory list, and engage with the Bridge AI program are 3 very useful next steps, as well as a 4th next step, I'll say, which is watch out for some BSI comms in the future around AI, in particular for small businesses. And with that then, we'll move on to closing today, and I'll just say thank you very much for attending, and to look out for some of the other events that we have taking place. As you know, that we run a whole myriad of events here at BSI, and you can find out more about them by going to bsigroup.com/events. Ones in particular are tomorrow. We've got 2 half-day virtual sessions. Hopefully you've signed on to those. If not, there's plenty of time to do so. The first in the morning being on quality, facilities management and construction products. I'll be doing my best to listen to that one, so please come join in for that, as well as then finishing off the day on what is probably the most important topic, health, safety and well-being, particularly when it comes to things like all the changes we've been seeing in relation to the Building Safety Act. And then of course in the new year we'll do as we have done in previous years. You'll be able to hear some insights from us as we talk about what's happened from a BSI point of view in 2023 and our priorities going forward for 2024, and that's happening on the 30th of Jan. We hope you've enjoyed today. Please keep spreading the message. I hope that it's empowered you to look at some AI for yourselves for the future. And I wish you, if I don't speak to you between now and then, a lovely Christmas and a happy new year. Thank you all very much for attending.